Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about metas and how metas work in Legends of Runeterra, and why some people might complain about certain metas, even though you might feel like, no, this meta is fine. What are you talking about? This one is fine, because there's been a lot of talk on Reddit and a lot of disagreement about whether this current meta we find ourselves in is problematic or it is not. So I thought I would just do a quick video. I did this on my stream yesterday as well. So if you were there for that, thank you for being there for a start. But also, you've probably seen me explain this. And that is how metas work. Now, I'm starting off here with Magic the Gathering. This is how a Magic the Gathering meta works, and we'll get into Runeterra in a little bit. But this is how Magic the Gathering metas work, and other card games as well. Not all card games, I'm sure, because, I don't know the rules and how other card games work. But, this is how Magic works, and this is your kind of standard. And basically what this means is that aggro decks beat control decks. They get online before control decks can really stop them. And, they're dead before they've even, played that many cards. So aggro beats control. Control beats mid-range, because mid-range isn't fast enough to just race them down, and then by the time the mid-range, start activating their game plan, they're getting controlled out. They're getting their board wiped, etc. And mid-range beats aggro. Mid-range can kind of keep up with aggro. It can play bigger units than aggro. Get favorable trades and survive the onslaught that is aggro. And then combo kind of sits on the outside here, and it kind of depends on like what combo deck you're playing. Some can be very fast, some can be very slow, and it's kind of up in the air, as to how fast is your combo, like what exactly is the combo, and it might have different matchups against the different ones depending on exactly what the combo is. So combo kind of sits on the outside of this entire circle, because it's just dependent on what that combo is trying to do. But now let's move to Runeterra. And here is what the Runeterra meta looks like. Here you've got aggro at the top that beats combo decks. So think of this as like, something like Pirate aggro or Discard aggro will beat something like Lee Sin, because, they're going to be dead before they get to play Lee Sin. They're not going to have the time. And this is obviously isn't like 100% of the time. This is just all general rules that, generally aggro, will be favored against combo decks. As I've just mentioned, something like Talia Thralls or Lee Sin, aggro decks will be favored against combo decks. But combo beats control. You could see this as we currently are in, something like a Sivir deck will beat like a heavy control Shadow Elves Freljord thing, because they can't deal with, the spell shields and, the denies and the things like that often go into combo decks. They don't have great ways of trying to deal with that a lot of times. So, combo beats control. But control can be aggro in Legends of Runeterra. You think about playing a bunch of 1-drops and then they just avalanche you and your whole board is dead before you even hit them in the face. That's pretty bad for you. They have healing, they have all of that. And so you're in trouble as an aggro deck when you come up against control. And then mid-range is kind of in the middle, and it's got this circle here to sort of showcase, mid-range is in the middle. Now, mid-range, can beat all of them. It can outvalue aggro and just be bigger than them and win that way. It can race combo if it wants to, and get that win just before combo gets its things online. And it can be controlled by, being big enough to survive things like avalanche and the like, and then beat them down as well. But it can lose to them all as well. So mid-range is kind of in the middle. It kind of has like a 50-50 against all of them. And what does this mean? Why is this important, and why would this affect how people might view different metas? Well, I think that the important thing is this. Basically, we are currently, and let's use the current example, we are currently in a combo meta. There is a lot of, Ionia and Shurima, Sivir, Zed, Akshan, Lee Sin, plenty of things like that are a lot of combo decks that try and, do some like Flurry of Fist into Ghost, into, giving extra attack, into, smacking you in the face for 15. That is happening a lot in the game at the current moment, and it hasn't really happened as much as this that I can remember. Sure, we've had Lee Sin metas when Lee Sin was oppressive himself, but there's kind of a range of just combo decks at the moment, all different flavors of kind of the same thing, which are all kind of combo decks. And so that means, because combo beats control, you essentially end up with 0 control. Control doesn't exist because it can't beat the best decks. And if you can't beat the best decks, or at least give them a good game, then why would you play Control? And so basically what you end up with is a meta that we currently have now, where you have plenty of combo, you have plenty of aggro, because aggro can beat combo, and you have a little bit of mid-range. So you have like plenty of combo, give that 3 ticks, you have plenty of aggro because that beats combo, and you have some mid-range, and you have no control. And this pretty much plays out for whatever one of these would be dominant. So for instance, if control was dominant, you would see no aggro, you'd see quite a bit of combo, and you'll always see some mid-range because it will always have somewhat of a game against any, whatever is, the top meta at the moment. And you can see this with decks. You can play this out currently, and as I've just said, mid-range tends to survive, and this is why a deck like a Shen Demacia deck has existed for a very, very long time, because it's a mid-range deck. It's the same reason why Ezreal Draven has existed for a very long time, because it's a mid-range deck, in essence, that can play at different speeds. It can win quite early, it can win quite late. It's a mid-range deck. Normally it's winning on turns like 8, 9, 10, something like that. And those decks get to survive in pretty much every meta because they're mid-range decks. And mid-range will always have some place in the meta because it will always be good against whatever is, the number one. And it can just adjust slightly to whichever one it wants to. So mid-range will always exist. But the problem is people might complain. If you're a control player and you love playing control, this meta is horrible for you. Because essentially you're getting stomped by a lot of things. You're going to see a lot of combo decks at the moment, and they're going to stomp you most of the time. Now, sometimes you'll get your favorite aggro matchup, but that's less than you currently are seeing combo, and so you probably are having a bad time if you're a control player. But if you're a combo or aggro player, you're probably thinking, oh, this meta's fine, this meta's great, what are you talking about? I get to play, my favorite type of decks. I have a good win rate with these decks, the meta is fine. There isn't really like one particular deck that is like crazy better than all the others. It's not like there's an Azir Aurelia like there was beforehand, even though funnily enough, like Azir Aurelia is sort of maybe the top deck. But it's not as crazy as it used to be, and so you probably think, oh, this meta is fine. But for certain people, this meta is anything but fine, because if you are a control player, you currently basically can't play the style of deck that you want to play. And this is pretty much true most of the time, because if you have 4 options here that it could be, you have aggro, mid-range, control, or combo. If you say that, one of those type of archetypes could be the dominant one, every single one of them but mid-range is going to create this problem. If you have an aggro meta, then you're not going to see much combo. If you have a combo meta, you're not going to see control. And if you have a control meta, you're not going to see much aggro. So most of the time, you're going to end up with one of these metas where things aren't ideal. And that is why people, and experienced players of this game always say the best metas are the mid-range metas. And that is because mid-range has a 50-50 against everything. So if you have a mid-range meta, essentially what you have is you get plenty of mid-range. You can play aggro if you want. You can play combo if you want. And you can play control if you want. That is what a mid-range meta looks like. Where, yes, mid-range is the top thing, but even if the top mid-range deck, let's say, has a 55% win rate, it's going to be 55% against everything. And so that means you're always going to have a game, right? Like 55%, sure, you're slightly unfavored, whatever, but you're going to have a game. Whereas now I would bet that like something like Sivir, a Sivir Z deck or whatever against a control deck would be favored something like, 70 to 75%, something like that. Where, I mean, sure, you're going to win sometimes because sometimes the opponent is just going to have a bad hand. They're going to have, triple Ruin Runner or something, and they can't play anything till turn 5. And yeah, you'll win those games perhaps. But, most games, you just won't win. And so you get pushed out. Whereas a mid-range meta, everything is on the table, and that's why that feels so good. Now, these classifications of decks aren't always, the correct, and people always pick up on this point of like, oh, this deck isn't quite any of them, blah blah blah. Like Ezreal Draven would be a good example where like Ezreal is kind of, or can be, a combo finisher, but you know, a lot of the deck is sort of mid-range, so what exactly is that deck? Yeah, there's a lot of things like that. I think the important thing to point out is, like, if you're trying to determine what a deck is, just think about it in terms of when is the deck winning. You know, you can have, you know, your full aggro on this side would be like, I don't know, discard or something like that. You know, like pirate aggro, discard, very aggressive, you know, aims to win by turns, let's say 5/6. You know, that's when these decks tend to want to finish the game, is on turns 5/6. Then you get your kind of like, you know, aggro mid-range decks that try to win like turn 7, maybe 8. And these can be things like scouts. Scouts, I think, is a good example where, you know, they can win on turn 6, particularly turn 6 because of, you know, Demacia turn 6 plays. So they can win on turn 6, they can win on turn 8. It could go to turn 9, but generally it's probably around turn 7 that these decks winning. Lurk would be another good one for this. Then you have your kind of traditional mid-range, which is kind of like 8 to 10. And in this you get like your Shen, Demacia, Ash, Noxus, things like that. And then, you know, you have like your slower mid-range. This would be something like, probably like dragons with Aurelion Sol, you know, that can kind of win from turns like 10 to 12, maybe 10 to 11. And then you have your full like control that can win anywhere from probably like turns 10 to anything, you know, as long as it happens to go on. And these are obviously a full control like a Nivea or something. So you have these different, you know, areas of decks, and there's like, you know, spectrums in between them. As I think, like Scouts is a good example, like a Scouts aggro or mid-range, which is kind of in between, right? And that'll probably play out as well. Like if Scouts is your top deck, you know, it's probably more likely like that it doesn't quite follow as much of this pattern. You know, it doesn't completely shut out combo, but combo will feel probably more unfavored against it. Whereas if discard aggro is your best deck, then combo is probably not. It's not a good time to play a combo deck if you want. And combo decks can kind of fall into a similar sort of pattern as well, where, you know, you can have very fast combo decks, probably not as fast as like turn 5 or 6, although we have seen that. But I would say, you know, you can put like Zed Sivir on like this. You know, Zed Sivir would be something like in here. We've seen like TLC Control, which is a combo deck, would be in something like that. Maybe, you know, Turbo Thralls as well, you can perhaps put in this. But essentially, when you end up in like the combo meta that we currently have, they kind of all, I mean, to be fair, you could put Zed here as well. Yeah, and you could put like Thralls here, and you could put like Trundle Ascender Control down there. And you could put like Ezreal Karma here. And so essentially what happens though is when you get these combo metas, because aggro is the kind of the only, like, you know, thing that's fighting against them, you often get a race to the bottom. It often becomes who can win the fastest, you know, which deck can, you know, outdo the other deck quicker than they can, which can get their combo off fastest to win the game. Because essentially it's just a race, you know, it's a race of who has the right cards and who can do it the fastest. And so you end up with like not a great meta, to be honest. You end up with not a great time because essentially they all just end up racing to the bottom. And I think one deck in particular, even though it's not a combo deck, kind of showcases what I mean here, where everything just becomes a race to the bottom. So this is the deck that I want to highlight that kind of showcases this point. Now, I would say that this is more of an aggro deck than a combo deck. But I think it showcases the point in terms of everything being just a race to the bottom, and the kind of, this deck showcases something that, like, once pointed out, I think it's like, whoa, yeah, that is true. And this deck is, of course, like an elusive deck. You know, you're playing a bunch of elusives, you're trying to smack them in the face with elusives, and you're trying to get the elusives with high attack. But this kind of deck would never exist if there was any control decks around. Because essentially, you look at these tricks that they have, Elixir of Wrath, Brothers Bond, Thorned Blade. Like, most of the time, you know, when Thorned Blade came out, people were like, oh, this is a bad card. You know, 4 mana to, you know, you have to pre-commit like 4 mana to get use of this, really. You know, you're just gonna, the unit's gonna get killed, and then you're gonna have wasted 4 mana because it's not giving any health, and none of these combat tricks are. And that's why really they haven't seen that much play in the past. Brothers Bond maybe being the exception because it grants 2 allies extra attack, and therefore, you know, you need to kill 2 things to sort of deal with what this has done. But these other tricks, like, they would never really see play. And that's because you just get controlled out. Your unit would just get killed, and then you've wasted like a card and some mana to essentially, just give your opponent a juicier target to kill. But now you can play this. Because there's no control, these cards now can exist. Weirdly enough, crazy as that is, like, even though beforehand it would make no sense, most of the time you'd say these cards just don't make any sense to play, but now they do. Because now everything is about getting your own combos off, and, as soon as this deck plays against any deck that has interactivity, it loses, pretty much. It loses on the spot, because you can't, you can't pre-commit these and expect to get away with it. But against those other combo decks that, are just playing for their own win condition, you can get away with it. And that's why that deck can exist in this current meta, but in most, it definitely would not. So this is just like a quick, explanation of what is going on, when you have different metas, and why, people will complain about metas like this, because essentially, if you're a control player, it's a really bad time to be playing the game at the moment. If you, like if a Nivea is your favorite champion, or you love like Feel the Rush or something like that, it's just a bad time to be playing these type of decks. And essentially, it kind of always will be, unless mid-range is the king. So, that's essentially what we all have to hope for is, don't nerf Shen. These kind of things, like, don't nerf Shen, don't nerf anything that is like quintessentially mid-range. Buff Demacia, if anything, so that we can get mid-range metas back, so that everyone can play the decks that they want to. So yeah, that's just the video today. I will be doing a stream today as well, so come check it out if you would be so kind. And I will also potentially, depending on what gets revealed today, do a video about the patch notes as well, whether it's a balance patch or whether, we maybe see what the 10th region is. That'll be fun, and people can have a meltdown. And yeah, have a nice day, everyone. I'll see you later on, hopefully with news of whatever the next region is, because that will be very, very exciting if we do get to know, or potentially what's going to happen after the 10th region, because we don't really know yet either. So with that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a really nice day.